religion. I mean, it's a powerful force, isn't it?
Yeah.
Shaping billions of lives, for better or worse.
Definitely.
We see it inspiring these incredible acts of love and compassion, but also fueling like some of the darkest moments in history.
Yeah.
It's quite the paradox, really.
For sure.
So how do we navigate this? Is it even possible, you think, for faith to somehow transcend all these divisions and become a force, a real force for unity in our world?
Right.
That feels very fractured right now.
Yeah.
That's what we're going to be looking at today as we take a deep dive into the Baha'i faith.
Okay.
And its vision for the future of religion.
Very cool. Yeah, it's a bold vision.
Okay.
But one that I think really directly confronts the challenges religion is facing today.
Okay.
You see, at its heart, the Baha'i faith really emphasizes the oneness of humanity.
Okay.
Viewing all religions as kind of part of a single unfolding story of truth.
Gotcha. I'm already intrigued. This oneness of humanity, that's not just like a feel-good slogan, right? Yeah.
No.
How does that actually play out in the Baha'i teachings? Because honestly, I've always wrestled with this idea of how religions can preach unity, but also claim to have the only truth.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. That's a tension that the Baha'i faith addresses head on with this concept called progressive revelation.
Progressive revelation. Okay.
Yeah. The idea is that, God reveals truth gradually through different messengers throughout history.
Right.
Figures like Jesus, Buddha, Muhammad, each kind of building upon what came before. So for Baha'is, Baha'u'llah, the founder of their faith, is the most recent in this line of divine messengers, bringing teachings relevant to our current age.
So it's not about replacing previous religions, but kind of adding another layer of understanding.
Exactly.
Almost like software updates for humanity's spiritual operating system.
I like that analogy, yeah.
Yes.
And this idea of progressive revelation has some pretty radical implications. For instance, it challenges the notion that any single religion can hold a monopoly on truth.
Right.
Instead, the Baha'i faith kind of encourages us to see truth as an ongoing process of discovery, with each religion offering a piece of the puzzle.
That's a fascinating way to frame it.
Yeah.
But wouldn't that then lead to a kind of like spiritual free-for-all?
Right.
Where anything goes.
Yeah.
How do you then maintain moral standards?
Yeah.
Or a sense of shared values?
Right.
If all paths are considered valid.
Well, that's where the Baha'i teachings on the unity of religion come in.
Okay.
They believe that, while the outward forms and rituals of different religions might vary, there's a core set of spiritual principles that run through them all.
Okay.
Values like love, compassion, justice, the pursuit of truth. These are the threads that bind us together despite our differences.
It's like there's a common spiritual language.
Yes.
Even if the dialects are very different.
Right.
But let's get down to brass tacks here.
Yeah.
How does all of this translate into addressing some of the thornier issues that face religion today?
Right.
Let's talk gender equality, a topic where religious interpretations have historically been, let's just say, problematic.
Absolutely. And the Baha'i faith actually takes a very firm stance on
right.
this, proclaiming the full equality of men and women in all spheres of life.
Okay.
This is considered a fundamental principle, not open for interpretation.
Okay, but how do they reconcile that with scriptures from other traditions that seem to support patriarchal structures? I mean, you can't just ignore those texts, can you?
You're right. Those texts are there.
Yeah.
The Baha'i approach is actually twofold.
Okay.
First, they emphasize the importance of context. A lot of these scriptures were revealed in societies where gender roles were drastically different from what we know today. And second, they prioritize reason and justice when interpreting these texts. So if a passage seems to contradict this fundamental principle of equality, it needs to be re-examined in light of our evolving understanding of human dignity and rights.
So it's about actively engaging with scripture.
Yes.
Not blindly accepting interpretations that might be, outdated or just plain wrong.
Exactly. And what's interesting is that this reinterpretation is happening very organically across many faiths today.
Yeah.
We see more women taking on leadership roles, challenging traditional interpretations, and demanding their voices be heard.
I've definitely noticed that shift.
Yeah.
And it's exciting to see those boundaries being pushed.
Yeah.
Let's move on to another hot button issue, the environment. Seems like some religious groups struggle to reconcile their faith with the urgent need for, environmental action. Where does the Baha'i faith stand on this?
Well, for Baha'is, caring for the planet isn't just a political issue.
Okay.
It's a spiritual imperative.
Okay.
They see the earth as a sacred trust. It's a reflection of divine creation that we're obligated to protect and nurture.
Which makes sense, considering their emphasis on the oneness of humanity.
Exactly.
If we're all interconnected,
Yeah.
then harming the planet is ultimately harming ourselves.
Precisely. And they take this pretty seriously. The Baha'i writings explicitly connect environmental degradation to spiritual and moral decline.
Wow.
They call for, a shift in consciousness.
Okay.
Recognizing our interconnectedness with nature and embracing a more sustainable way of life.
That's a refreshing perspective. But how does this translate into, concrete action?
Right.
Are there any examples of how the Baha'i community are putting these principles into practice?
Yeah, there are actually numerous initiatives happening at local and global levels.
Okay.
For instance, many Baha'i communities have adopted sustainable practices like organic farming, energy conservation, and waste reduction. They're also actively involved in things like reforestation efforts, environmental education programs, and advocating for policy changes that address climate change.
So it's not just talk. They're walking the walk.
Yeah.
It's interesting how their approach seems to kind of weave together spiritual principles and practical action.
Yeah.
I'm curious, how does this play out when it comes to the relationship between religion and politics?
Right.
An area that's always fraught with tension.
Yeah, that's a key question. And one that the Baha'i faith navigates quite differently than some other traditions.
Okay.
They believe in the separation of church and state.
Okay.
Meaning that religious institutions shouldn't directly control government.
Okay.
However, they don't advocate for a strict secularism where religion is entirely excluded from public life.
Right.
Instead, they see a role for faith in inspiring moral and ethical leadership, promoting social justice, and contributing to the well-being of society as a whole.
So it's a more nuanced approach.
Yes.
Recognizing the potential pitfalls of both extremes.
Yeah.
Theocracy on the one hand, and a purely secular society on the other.
Exactly. And that middle ground, I think, is where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
The Baha'i faith doesn't shy away from engaging with complex social and political issues.
Okay.
But they do so in a way that emphasizes dialogue, collaboration, and respect for diverse viewpoints.
I'm starting to see, a pattern here.
Yeah.
It seems like this theme of unity, oneness of humanity, the oneness of religion, the interconnectedness of all things, really kind of permeates every aspect of their teaching.
You've hit the nail on the head, and this underlying principle is really what shapes their vision for a future where religion transcends its divisions and becomes a unifying force for good in the world.
All right, that's a pretty bold vision. But I'm all ears. How do they envision this happening in a world that often feels so hopelessly divided?
Well, they believe it starts with a fundamental shift in consciousness, recognizing our shared humanity and embracing this principle of unity and diversity. This means moving beyond mere tolerance to actually actively celebrating and learning from our differences.
That sounds great in theory. How do you actually put that into practice, though? We're talking about bridging some pretty deep divides here.
Right.
Religious, cultural, political. Is that even realistically possible?
The Baha'i faith doesn't claim to have all the answers, but they do offer a roadmap, a set of spiritual principles and practical tools for navigating these challenges. And that's what we'll be exploring further as we continue this deep dive.
This is getting good. We've just scratched the surface and I'm already hooked. Let's take a closer look next time at how the Baha'i faith translates these lofty ideals into real-world action.
Okay.
Addressing issues like social justice, economic inequality, and global conflict.
Sounds good.
Okay, so let's get back into our deep dive.
All right.
Before we took a break, we were talking about the Baha'i faith's vision for a future where religion acts as a bridge, not a barrier.
Yeah.
And one of the key things that stuck with me was this emphasis on not just preaching unity, but actively working towards it.
Yeah. Absolutely. For Baha'is, words without action are like seeds without soil.
Okay.
They won't grow anything. So let's maybe delve into some concrete examples.
Yeah, let's do it.
Of how they're putting these principles into action.
Okay.
Starting with a topic close to my heart, education.
Ooh, okay. Now, I've heard whispers about Baha'i schools having a very different vibe.
Yeah.
Something like beyond just textbooks and exams. Is there something to that?
Definitely. You could say their approach to education is less about like filling buckets
Okay.
and more about lighting fires.
Okay.
They believe education should nurture not just the intellect, but also the character and spirit.
So it's not enough to be book smart. You also need to be, what, heart smart.
Exactly. And this focus on character development goes hand in hand with fostering unity.
Okay.
Baha'i schools welcome students from all backgrounds, different religions, ethnicities, socioeconomic statuses, you name it.
That's pretty remarkable considering how many schools, even today, still struggle with, like segregation and implicit bias.
Yeah.
You know?
It is. And they go beyond just having like diverse classrooms.
Okay.
They actively incorporate lessons and activities that promote understanding and respect for different cultures and beliefs.
I see how that ties into their whole, unity and diversity thing.
Right.
But wouldn't, like, exposing kids to so many different perspectives at a young age be, I don't know, confusing?
Yeah, that's a common concern. But the Baha'i perspective is that early exposure to diversity actually strengthens critical thinking skills.
Okay.
Instead of blindly accepting one set of beliefs, students learn to analyze information, evaluate different perspectives, and form their own conclusions.
So it's about kind of giving them the tools to navigate a complex world.
Exactly.
Where they're going to encounter, inevitably, diverse viewpoints.
Yeah.
I like that. But does this, like, unity through education thing just stop at the school doors?
Not at all. The Baha'i community also organizes events and activities that bring people together from different walks of life.
Like what?
Interfaith dialogues, devotional gatherings, even just like neighborhood potlucks where people can share their cultures and connect on a human level.
It sounds like they're kind of weaving unity into the very fabric of their community life.
Yeah.
But let's zoom out a bit. We've talked about education, community building.
Yeah.
But how does the Baha'i faith address some of the bigger, like, systemic issues facing our world, like poverty, economic inequality?
Well, they see social and economic justice as absolutely integral to a unified world.
Okay.
After all, you can't really talk about oneness while ignoring, like, vast disparities in wealth and opportunity.
Right.
The Baha'i writings actually call for the elimination of extremes of wealth and poverty, advocating for systems that ensure everyone has a fair chance to thrive.
That's a pretty bold stance. But how do they move beyond, like, pronouncements to actually tackling these issues?
Well, for one, they're actively involved in grassroots initiatives like microfinance programs, which provide small loans to help people start their own businesses and kind of lift themselves out of poverty. They also promote sustainable agriculture techniques, especially in developing countries, to help communities become more self-sufficient.
So it's about empowering people to become agents of their own economic well-being.
Exactly.
Not just relying on handouts.
Right. And their focus on education, especially for women and girls, is another key piece of the puzzle. They believe that education is a powerful tool for breaking the cycle of poverty and creating a more just and equitable society.
I'm starting to see how all these pieces fit together.
Yeah.
Education, community building, economic empowerment. It's like a multi-pronged approach to creating lasting change.
Yeah.
But let's not shy away from the elephant in the room here. What about racial equality?
Right.
In a world still grappling with systemic racism, how does the Baha'i faith address this deeply entrenched issue?
Well, they consider racial prejudice a direct affront to this core principle of the oneness of humanity.
Okay.
The Baha'i writings unequivocally condemn racism and call for the elimination of all forms of discrimination based on race, ethnicity, or background.
It's one thing to denounce racism, but it's quite another to actually, like, dismantle the systems that perpetuate it. What steps are they taking to move beyond just words to, actual action?
Well, they've been actively involved in racial justice movements for decades, promoting interracial dialogue and understanding and advocating for policies that promote equality and opportunity for all.
Can you give me some specific examples?
Sure. For example, in the U.S., the Baha'i community was at the forefront of the civil rights movement.
Wow.
actively participating in marches and demonstrations, and they continue to work with other organizations and communities to address issues like racial profiling, mass incarceration, and educational disparities.
So they're not just talking the talk, they're rolling up their sleeves and getting involved in the, messy work of social change.
Right.
But let's be honest. Tackling these kinds of systemic issues is like trying to turn a giant ship around.
Yeah.
It takes time. It takes persistence. It takes, a whole lot of coordinated effort. What gives Baha'is the hope and motivation to keep pushing for change when the obstacles seem so daunting?
It comes back to that foundational belief in the inherent goodness of humanity and the transformative power of unity. They believe that no matter how entrenched a problem may seem, it can be overcome through collective action, love, and unwavering commitment to justice.
I can see how that would be a powerful motivator.
Yeah.
Even in the face of setbacks and resistance.
Right.
But this brings up another question for me. We've talked about how the Baha'i faith addresses various, social and global challenges. But how do they see their role in relation to other religions and belief systems?
Right.
Do they believe everyone needs to convert to their faith to achieve this vision of unity?
Not at all. In fact, they actively promote interfaith dialogue and collaboration. They believe that each religion has something unique and valuable to contribute to the collective good.
That's a pretty radical departure from the my way or the highway approach that some religions, take. But how do they reconcile this openness with their own belief in the validity of their teachings? It seems like a tricky balance.
It is a delicate balance, and one that requires a healthy dose of humility. They acknowledge that they don't have all the answers, and they're open to learning from other traditions. They believe that through respectful dialogue and collaboration, different religions can find common ground and work together towards shared goals.
So it's not about erasing differences or claiming superiority, but rather finding those points of convergence and leveraging them for the betterment of humanity.
It's about recognizing the inherent worth and dignity of every individual, regardless of their beliefs, and working together to create a world where everyone can flourish.
This has been a truly illuminating, exploration of how the Baha'i faith is translating its vision of unity into action. But I'm sure there are many listening who still have questions, maybe even some healthy skepticism.
Sure.
So in our final segment, let's address some of the common criticisms and challenges facing the Baha'i faith. And explore how they navigate those complexities while staying true to their core principles. So we're back for this final part of our deep dive into the Baha'i faith. And, as we've been exploring their vision for a unified world, I can't help but wonder, is it all just a bit too idealistic? I mean, we live in a world where conflict and division just seem to be the norm. How do Baha'is reconcile their hopeful vision with the harsh realities that we face every single day?
It's a very fair question. And frankly, a lot of people do view the Baha'i faith as somewhat utopian. But I think it's important to remember that for Baha'is, unity isn't like some passive state of blissful harmony. It's an active process, a constant striving towards a more just and equitable world.
So it's not about erasing differences or pretending that conflicts don't exist.
No.
But rather finding ways to navigate them constructively.
Exactly. And one of the tools they really emphasize is consultation. The process of collaborative decision-making. Where everyone's voice is heard and respected, even when there are disagreements.
That sounds great in theory, but let's be real. Consensus building can be painfully slow, especially when you're dealing with complex, emotionally charged issues. How do they handle those situations where you need quick, decisive action?
It's definitely a balancing act. The Baha'i faith recognizes the need for both individual initiative and collective decision-making. So while consultation is encouraged for matters affecting the community as a whole, individuals are also empowered to act on their own conscience in situations that require immediate attention.
I see how this approach could actually be quite practical. Especially in a world where, top-down solutions often fail to address the needs of these diverse communities.
Sure.
But I have to ask, does this emphasis on unity ever clash with the need for individual expression and freedom of thought?
That's a question that comes up a lot.
Yeah.
And it gets to the heart of how the Baha'i faith reconciles unity with diversity.
Okay.
They believe that true unity doesn't require uniformity of thought or belief.
Okay.
In fact, they encourage individuals to develop their own understanding of truth while also respecting the perspectives of others.
So it's not about everyone singing from the same hymn sheet,
right,
but rather creating a space where different voices can harmonize.
I like that analogy.
Yeah.
And this respect for individual conscience extends to issues like freedom of religion.
Okay.
The Baha'i faith explicitly forbids coercion in matters of belief.
Okay.
No one is forced to convert or adhere to their teachings against their will.
That's certainly a departure from some other religious traditions that have historically been less than tolerant of those who hold different beliefs.
Yeah, for sure.
But this raises another question.
Okay.
If Baha'is believe in the validity of all religions,
right,
why bother trying to convert anyone at all?
Right.
Why not just let everyone follow their own path?
Well, it's not about trying to create like a one-size-fits-all religion.
Okay.
They believe that Baha'u'llah's teachings offer a unique perspective on things like unity, justice, the spiritual evolution of humanity that's relevant to our current age.
Okay.
So they share their beliefs freely, inviting others to explore those ideas and see if they resonate, but ultimately the choice is left to the individual.
It sounds like they're walking a tightrope between sharing their faith and respecting individual autonomy.
It is.
It's a delicate dance, for sure.
For sure.
But I'm curious, what about the criticisms that the Baha'i faith is too focused on creating like a world government?
Right.
That their vision of unity is actually like a veiled attempt to impose their beliefs on everyone.
Yeah, those are misconceptions that often stem from misunderstanding their teachings.
Okay.
While the Baha'i faith does envision a future where global institutions promote cooperation and address issues like war and poverty, they believe this should be achieved through a gradual process of consensus building, not through coercion or force.
So it's about evolving towards a more unified world order.
Right.
But one that respects the diversity of cultures and beliefs.
Exactly.
I'm seeing a recurring theme here.
Yeah.
It always comes back to that core principle of the oneness of humanity. It's like the lens through which they view the world and approach every challenge.
Exactly.
But I have to ask, what gives them hope that this vision, however compelling, can actually be realized in our deeply divided world?
Well, their optimism isn't naive.
Okay.
It's rooted in their belief in the transformative power of love.
Okay.
And the inherent goodness of humanity.
Okay.
They see these challenges we face not as signs of inevitable decline, but as growing pains.
Okay.
The birth pangs of a new era of unity and peace.
That's a powerful way to frame it.
Yeah.
It's like choosing to see the potential for growth and evolution, even amidst the chaos and conflict.
Oh.
But let's get practical for a moment.
Okay.
For those listening who might be intrigued by these ideas, where do we even begin? How can we apply these principles in our own lives, even if we're not Baha'i?
Well, I think it starts with a willingness to examine our own biases and assumptions, to step outside of our comfort zones and engage with people who hold different beliefs and perspectives. It's about practicing empathy, seeking understanding, and building bridges of connection across the divides that separate us.
So it's not about grand gestures or sweeping pronouncements, but rather these small, everyday choices that we make. How we treat each other, how we engage in dialogue, how we contribute to our communities.
Exactly. And the Baha'i faith really reminds us that these seemingly small acts of kindness and understanding, when multiplied across millions of people, can create a ripple effect that transforms the world.
This deep dive has been like a fascinating journey. Challenging my assumptions, opening up new perspectives on the role of religion in the 21st century. It's clear that the Baha'i faith offers a unique and compelling vision for a more unified world, one that's both idealistic and deeply pragmatic.
It's been a pleasure sharing these insights with you.
Yeah, likewise.
And I hope it sparked something within you. a sense of possibility,
Yeah.
a desire to contribute to creating a world where unity and diversity is not just a dream,
Right.
but a lived reality.
It definitely has.
Wonderful.
And perhaps the most important takeaway is this. Building a better world starts not with grand pronouncements or sweeping revolutions, but with the small, everyday choices we make.
Absolutely.
The bridges we build, the conversations we have, the love and compassion we share.
For sure.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the Baha'i faith.
Thank you.
Until next time, keep seeking, keep learning, and keep building a more unified world.
Yes.
One heart at a time.